if I was doing the exercise, what would I say for 60 seconds? And over time, if you do this 5 times a day, 5 minutes, so 1 minute each, you do this for the year, that's over 1,800 times that you're doing the exercise. And if you can present something, if I can do that, if you can do that with subjects you have no clue, no understanding, no expertise in, imagine what you can do with something you actually know something in.
The next question is more leaning towards current events about the pandemic. I'm sure you have been invited, just as I have, to speak to an audience, whether it's a paid gig or not, who are just wrecked by the pandemic. They're wrecked. And my talk this weekend, because I saw the pointers that the organizers wanted me to speak on, the context is they're just pretty much wrecked. They don't know what's going to happen. They aren't selling. They just want to wake up when September ends, hopefully. But but yeah, they just want to wake up and say, when are we gonna go back to when I was selling, when I was making money? Now, how do you inspire, or how do you speak to an audience like that? How do you tell? I'm making you work for me now. How do you tell them that it's gonna be all right, and we need, because that's the audience I'm gonna be speaking to this weekend, and I want to know what your thoughts on that would be. How would you do it?
Absolutely, and I love the Green Day reference. Nice pull in there, which I'm very surprised that you brought up. So it's cool. But I think the idea, okay, with COVID is simply best. And I don't have the perfect answer. Okay, I got really lucky because of the nature of the industry I'm in. I'm lucky I'm in the online space, so I don't have the perfect answer. But I'll give you my take. My take is understand who the real enemy is. It's interesting, Sean. I ask a lot of people around me, "Who's your enemy?" And they always reply with the following: my mom, my parents, my wife, the guy who cut me off in traffic this morning. I'm like, wow, you really don't like your family. But that's the thing, right? We always answer with somebody else. Oh, Sean cut me off in traffic today. Sean sucks, right? But here's what most people don't realize is that we all have the same enemy. And that enemy is time. You can throw money at time. You can yell at time. You can slap time. You can try and throw it in the garbage bin. You can do whatever you want with time. Time always wins. And once we realize that time is the enemy, not people or circumstances or events, that's when we start to change the way that we think about our decisions. A lot of people say, oh, 2020 is canceled, as if you can go to a bank and get a loan back for it. Right? Can I get 2020 back? Like, no, you can't buy back time. So you need to figure out how to reinvest it. I probably lost 70% of my revenue overnight, right? It sucked. Wasn't great. But I asked, and I cried, I was pretty sad for 2 to 3 days. But then after that, I kind of just said, okay, I don't get this time back. I'm only going to be 24 once. What do I do with the rest of the 9 months? I can't go to Amsterdam. I can't go to Jordan. I can't go to all these amazing events. So what do I do instead? And I started building a mastermind group with a lot of smart people I knew. We started brainstorming ideas. And I came up with guesting on podcasts, doubling down on my content. I'm in the process right now, Sean, of writing my next content for the next 5 years.
Yeah, I saw in your bio. That's amazing.
It's crazy. Like I just, like, as of this recording, I have content until March of 2022.
Wow.
It's insane, right? But I never had time for that before because I was always on flights. And it's hard to write scripts when you're flying because you're stressed and tired, and you're thinking about your speech or people you're gonna meet. So you're always on all the time. But now you're not really on. So that I guest on 20 podcasts a week now, trying to guest on 10,000 podcasts. And then the third thing that I'm doing is, of course, coaching my clients and building virtual experiences for them. So I think the idea is there's always a way to spend your time in a way that's effective, right? And I also ramped up my learning as well. I'm learning a lot more than I used to. So the key is, what are you going to do with your year? And if you don't invest it properly, your competitors are going to crush you. when 2021 comes back. Because the key is not about waiting for the lights to turn on. It's working so hard and so efficiently that when the lights turn on, you're running faster for the gate than everyone else.
Awesome. I could just like cut that out and play it on video on my talk this week. I'm just kidding, but
They're like,
really,
who's this guy?
yeah.
He doesn't look Filipino to me.
But yeah, very good insight. Thank you so much. I'm going to be straight with you of incorporating that in my talk. The 10 to
Please, please,
20%. Yeah, I'm going to
please do.
incorporate it there. So,
Yeah, just quote me.
yeah, I'm going to quote you. Definitely. You have done over 900 talks, presentations. I wonder, and you need to keep on improving daily, right? So 10 hours of podcasts a week. Aside from that, what are things that you do daily that affects your improvement in how you deliver talks and in how you craft them? Do you do something every day that just hones you as an individual, as a public speaker? What is it?
Yeah, of course, there's a lot of daily stuff that we can talk about. Here's an easy one that people can implement right after this call. It's called the random word exercise. So for the audience's sake, Sean, why don't you just give me a random word?
Supercalifragilistic. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, please
Um,
do.
augmented.
Augmented?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. You like giving me complex words. So what I have to do with this word is I have to create a presentation out of thin air. So here I go. We always think about getting to the next level, whether it's our business, our lives, our health, our relationships. And the best way to think about that next level is not just about the status quo, because the status quo gets us nowhere, but rather, how do we augment our lives to a new reality, to a reality that is not like any other? And by augmenting that experience, we'll be able to create the lives that we want, whether it's our public speaking skills, our income in our businesses, or to the relationships that we care about. And that's exactly why in this week's presentation, I'm going to be sharing you some of the ways that I've augmented my life so that you can augment yours. So notice how I just can like made that up out of thin air, right? First thing I want to point out for people, right, before Sean starts clapping and saying I'm a great speaker, is I've done this 1,000 times. I literally do this on every podcast I'm in, so I'm forced to practice. So the advice for you is all I'm asking for is 5 minutes every day, 5 words, 1 minute each. Go to your house where you already live and just go lamp, wife that doesn't like me, laundry, teapot, door. Do 1 minute each. And if you're in a public setting, you don't need to do the exercise, but at least think about it mentally. If I'm walking and I see a building, obviously I'm not going to present it, but if I was doing the exercise, what would I say for 60 seconds? And over time, if you do this 5 times a day, 5 minutes, so 1 minute each, you do this for the year, that's over 1,800 times that you're doing the exercise. And if you can present something, if I can do that, if you can do that with subjects you have no clue, no understanding, no expertise in, imagine what you can do with something you actually know something in.
Wow. That's the first time I've ever heard about that exercise. I'm going to be trying it out. So, that is something that you do daily. Definitely looks like it has helped you tons, and you could do it with the word. By the way, that's just top of mind. I don't know why I said that word, but that's top of mind right now. So, that daily routine, guys, helps Brenden to improve his daily craft. Now, maybe you want to start with one word, maybe you want to start with two, that's fine. But if you can go to 5 words, definitely would fast forward and would help you to catalyze your growth as a public speaker. I wonder, you're mentoring people from all walks of life, even C-level executives. What are some of the most common questions that have been asked of you, either in a one-on-one setting or in a mastermind setting? What are some of the most common questions that they ask you as a professional or as a mentor?
Of course, it's a great question. I would say the number one thing that I get the most in general is fear of public speaking. How do we get rid of it? So I'm happy to talk about that. So I think the idea that I've always found bizarre is regardless of the podcast I'm on, whether it's in New Zealand, the UK, and the Philippines, or anywhere, we're all scared of public speaking, but we don't really understand why. So I thought I would add a bit more clarity to that. The first part of the answer comes from where we give most of our presentations. The answer for most of us, whether you're a high school dropout or a PhD, is school, right? We don't wake up one morning and say, "Hey, Sean, you want to like get breakfast and present all day, man?" It doesn't happen, right? We only present when we're forced to. So we're in school. Let's say we're in high school together. History teacher comes up to us and says, "Hey, I need you to do a presentation on the Renaissance." And you're sitting there like, "Is this like a fruit?" And then you find out later it's a time period in history and you got to present it. And three things happen in school that is common for any education system in the world. One, we never get to present a topic we care about, or we don't get to pick at all. Number two, students don't care, not because they don't care about us. We're great people, we're all amazing folks. The issue is they also have to present. So let's say, Sean, when you're keynoting an event, nobody is speaking after you in the audience. They're here to listen to you, they're focused on your message. But in school, it's one of those bizarre environments where you're presenting to people who are also presenting right after you. So when you're talking in that high school classroom, no one's listening to you because they're saying, "Oh, I have to go in 10 minutes. I got to think about my presentation." Number three, teachers are very well educated, very competent, but also very stressed. They have 40 people to go through in two classes. They don't have time to sit you down for 10 minutes and go, "Hey, Sean, let's talk about your presentation." Never happens. So let's recap. You never get to pick the topic, and if you do, you're not passionate about it. Students don't care, and teachers are too stressed to coach you. And this behavior gets perpetuated or gets repeated in every subject: English, math, sciences, languages, music, gym. Over and over and over again, we're taught to believe that public speaking is a chore. Public speaking is a responsibility. It's an obligation. If we're at school, it's tied to a grade. If we're at work, it's tied to a result. And if we fail at any part of that timeline, we get punished. If it's at school, it's a lower grade. If it's at work, Sean, that promotion you're supposed to get, too bad. Your presentation skills aren't good enough. So no wonder we're all scared of public speaking. Public speaking fear has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with the system that we grew up with.
And it is the number one fear in the world, right? Even more than death. So death is just the number two fear in our world today, statistically speaking. I'm wondering, and I'm gonna stem from that question, as this is not really part of my questions list. You probably do a lot of thinking every day, because like being able to pinpoint these three things has never crossed my mind. It has crossed yours. I wonder, like, what is your thinking time like? How do you think? Do you journal? Do you record yourself in a recorder, just self-talking? How do you think?
Beautiful question. No one's asked me that again, so love the questions. So I think the number one piece of advice I have is to be controversial. Like my favorite quote of all time is "Be insane or be the same." If you want to be like everyone else, that's totally fine. But if you're listening to this podcast, my assumption is you want to be different. And if you're trying to be like everyone else, you will never come up with new insights in the world. There's a great quote from a book that I'll recommend called Zero to One by Peter Thiel. It's one of the most important books I've read in my
Amazing book.
life. Yeah, there you go. So you're going to appreciate this. He asks in chapter 1 the most important question that everyone should be asking themselves, which is the following. And it's also the hardest question I've ever answered. What is the truth that you believe in? What is something that you believe to be true that most people think is stupid, that most people think is false, that most people think is not true? What he says basically is all controversial thinking leads to controversial ideas, and controversial ideas leads to unique thinking. Think about what you just mentioned, the whole death statistic thing. Most people, everyone in my industry, quotes that statistic in their workshops. So think about your standard Ivy League PhD professor who thinks they're really smart. They start their workshop like this. "Did you know, Sean, that after death, public speaking fear rampages society?" Obviously, I'm cartooning a bit here. I'm kind of joking here, but you get the idea. But let's spend 2 seconds thinking about this, just like rationally. If your goal, and I'm very passionate about this, if your goal is to help people get better at speaking, if your goal is to help people take that first step, why in the world are you comparing it to death? That makes no sense to me, right? Obviously, the statistic is true, but why are you mentioning that? If you start to talk more about random word exercises, you start talking about a kid who doesn't know anything about public speaking, who learned it anyways, that's more inspiring. And that's the number one rule of public speaking. Listen to your audience. And most people in my industry don't even do that, which makes zero sense. So that's the key. Be more controversial, and you'll find more controversial ideas. Find more controversial ideas, and you will find interesting ones.
Now I'm gonna be stemming from that question because I am curious.
Please do.
How do you be controversial? Like, do you sit down for like 30 minutes and say, this is my thinking time? Or do you listen to your podcasts 10 hours a week and after that have some reflection time and say, that's not true for me. And this is what's true for me. And I'm going to be sharing that in my next talk. How does it happen for you?
Yeah, no, that's a great follow-up. So I think the idea, for me anyways, and for people will be different. So if you take Bill Gates as an example, he reads a ton of books and he writes notes in the margins. So let's say you have books and there's like little like white spaces, he like takes notes, which is crazy. I don't do that personally. What I do is I have a Google Keep. So Google Keep is just a note a note app that you can have on your phone. So if you have an iPhone, it could be like Apple Notes or iNotes. I don't know what it's called. And what you want to have is you want to have a OneNote with all of your controversial things, all of your controversial beliefs. So let's say I'm listening to a podcast. That's where I mostly do my thinking. I mostly pay attention to what I disagree with. So let's say, for example, someone says public speaking fear is rampant in our society. I'm sitting there thinking with my own unique experiences in life. So this is probably an insight you wouldn't come up with. In the same way, there are some digital marketing insights that you would come up with that I wouldn't. But I could be sitting there and saying, I don't understand. Why do you think public speaking fear is a thing? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Then based on that thought, then I go, why do I think that? And then I expand and I write notes on that. You always want to take notes on your thinking. A good example in your industry is Seth Godin. So for those who don't know Seth, he has like the number one blog in the world. You can like type Seth in Google, like SETH, number one search result.
Yeah.
And his podcast Akimbo, I am probably his number one fan. I've listened to every single one of his
Wow.
episodes. And
Wow.
I watch like every Wednesday on my Google Calendar, it says watch Akimbo. That's when the new episode comes out every week. I carve out time every week to watch it. Why? Because he's one of the greatest controversial thinkers of our time. He has an episode on why weddings are stupid. He has an episode on the not weddings in particular, the cost of weddings, the complex behind it. He has episodes on marketing. He has episodes on anything. And that's why, in my opinion, he's one of the top marketing experts in the world, if not number one, because he says things that most marketers do not say, and he's right. Right? So I'll give you an example of one of those things. So a lot of people think that when you think about marketing, you should market to everybody. Get the Super Bowl ad. Get the Facebook ad to everyone. He thinks that's horseshit, right? He thinks the key to marketing is build the smallest viable audience. Focus on the first 1,000 people who love you, and they'll tell everyone else. And if you try and focus on 1,000,000 people, you'll go nowhere. Same thing with Master Talk. Is public speaking a big issue? Yes. Is public speaking a lot of people want to learn? Yes. Is everyone open to it? Hell no. Right? The people who are open to it are podcast hosts because they see the value in communication. They're a host. It's people who are entrepreneurs. It's tech startups. Focus on the small. That's the key.
Amazing. And just the trivia, his book Lynchpin, coupled with Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad, are the two books that made me decide 5 months in employment and that's all I need. And I'm quitting and I'm starting this business.
Yeah,
So
both books
definitely,
I've really much enjoyed.
yeah, definitely someone that I also highly recommend that you read, follow, listen to his podcast, Seth Godin. He will change your mind